The Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The roll call, please.
Lori Hayes,
Here.
Bill McIntosh,
Here.
Crystal Van Oost,
Here.
Jonathan Gerlach,
Here.
Shannon Holmes,
Here.
Bill Mullin,
Here.
Chris Yakubowski,
Here.
Meg Bomke.
Oh, she's supposed to be.
We have someone dialed in. We can't confirm if that's Meg or not.
I
think that's her number.
Is it? Oh,
I told her to say who.
Pamela Young,
Present.
Marcy Parker. Here. Robert Snyder.
Here.
Right, Chair, we have a forum.
Awesome. And
Chair, can we just ask, could one person online just say hi so we can see that we can actually hear you?
Yeah.
Because if somebody's replying, we want to know that we can hear you making comment.
Could you go back down to that phone number?
Yes.
Can somebody
Meg
online
Bomke
just say hi for
here.
us, please?
You.
Yes, hi,
Is that
this
Meg?
is Meg Bomke.
There we
Okay,
go.
great.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you,
Fantastic.
Meg.
Sorry for that.
No, that's fine. All right, I need an approval of the March 17th Policy Committee agenda. I don't think we need to do a vote on that, do we? To allow her to be online.
No. But it's a request to you.
Right,
in
yeah, I
appropriate
talked to her.
fashion, so it's-
Okay,
Let's just do a quick vote, just to be.
to allow her to be online?
Does require it.
Okay. Okay,
Motion to allow Supervisor Hall. And
okay.
part of the.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's, all right, we're all sewn up there. All right, and approval of the March 17th Policy Committee agenda.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's fine. All right. Now we're gonna go on to the public hearings for resolution 25-28, adopting a modification to the 2050 long-range transportation plan.
Yeah, we are not adopting this today, but
Okay.
we're just having the public hearing in case anybody sees any errors in the documents or wants to make any public comment.
All right. Is there anyone here that? No? Okay. So, all right, I guess I'll close the public hearing if there's nobody that is here to speak on this.
Did we get anything emailed to us? Okay, so that's fine. We can close.
Okay, great. All right, public involvement. Anyone here that would like to speak to the policy committee? Hey there, welcome. I don't see anybody. Any online comments or in writing comments?
Yes, from Donald Lauer, the B2 option would preserve the waterfalls in the Celebrate area and have less environmental impact, and B2 is also economically the best option.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we're moving right along. All right, going to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything from the consent agenda they'd like to pull?
Both tip items,
Yeah.
Chair, and as you know, the tip doesn't give new money to anything. It just acknowledges money that's been allocated prior to a particular project. The tip amendments are never us saying, yes, let's give this money to a project. They are always just money that somebody has already given to a project. We just have to say that we in agreement that that is so, and we put it in the tip.
Any questions?
I did have a question. I did ask Ian, why was on mic suddenly? I don't know why. But anyway, I did ask Ian earlier about that because it says that previous funding that was there, that 250, are we talking about the same thing?
Mhm.
Harrison?
Yep.
Okay, that $250,000 towards a study, that's $250,000. I was just wondering where it was coming from, or if it was from years ago, what's it supposed to be on that we're moving it? That's all I wanted.
Yeah, no, the answer to the question is that it's 3 sets of money that was allocated previously, $120,000 from the federal government, $100,000 from CMAC, which we allocated previously, and local match from the county of Spotsylvania on the federal grant, etc. And it's not new money, it's money that was previously awarded. We're just acknowledging it and putting it into the tip. If we don't put up, just for background information for newer members and the public, if we don't put an item in the tip, the relevant authority is not allowed to spend the money. It's a federal process of having a public hearing so that the public can comment, and then we allocate the money to the project in the tip before it may be spent. So that's a very simple process.
Yeah.
It does not allocate new money ever to a tip. It's usually already been allocated by somebody, and we then just publicly acknowledge that, yes, that's the money that's allocated, and if there are any public comments on it. So
And as a new member, is there a way that I could see, monies are in which one they are that are there for projects so that we could also take it?
So,
For example, this one, if 250 may be used, how much should we have left in it?
so the tip doesn't have money left in it. The money, as I said, comes from the 3 sources. So the federal government money is billions. So there's no sort of limit to us. That's a grant given to us. In terms of the local match, that comes from the county, so they'd have to answer how much they have left. And in terms of the CMAC money, you once a year or once every second year make a decision to allocate whatever money we get for that particular period, for that year or that 2-year cycle. So you will make that decision each year on that money. This was money that the policy committee voted on. Sean, was it 2 years ago or 1 year ago? I can't remember. But anyway, when we did the last.
Most recent CMAC.
Yeah.
DEG grant.
And generally, when we allocate CMAC money, we allocate about 90% of it. And then there's a little bit that gets put in a holding pen in case we have cost overruns or there's a crisis of some kind. So we always have a little bit in reserve, but we usually allocate all of it. I've got some information on that in my slides today because there's a little bit of bad news about CMAC money that we got from BDOT this morning, but I'll tell you about that when I get to my slide.
Okay, and also, again, it would be nice if, maybe I just need to meet with you separate, but I thought I wanted to share that question with everyone so that for the new members that we could see what kind of monies there are and where we could, retrieve those, instead of waiting that it happens to show up. And here it is, and thank you. Thank you.
There is a table spreadsheet, and we update it once a year. So every year there's a spreadsheet available. The current one is online. You can get it on our website.
Okay, get it on that website. Can you send me that link?
Yeah. Just send Dr. Young the link for the CMAC.
Send it to everyone
List.
interested. They're interested, they'll open it.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then the,
Chair Hayes, this is Supervisor
Yeah.
Bomke. It's appropriate. I do have a question about the first agenda item on consent.
absolutely.
Okay, if now is the appropriate time. I do see that this was an additional expense of $50,000. While it's not a lot of money, we seem to come back to a lot of additional things with FXBGO. And so what was the original project cost on this? Because it's indicating that it's an amendment. So it doesn't show on the spreadsheet what the original cost was of the entire project. So if this is an amendment, I'd like to know what was the original cost plus this amendment. And why wasn't this calculated properly in the very beginning?
Okay, so real quick, this is an amendment to the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. So it's amending our currently adopted FY 24-27 TIP. This is entering the TIP as a new project. So this is a new project that Fredericksburg Go is submitting, and therefore it's triggering the full amendment process. because it's a new project that's amending the existing document. This is not a amendment to an existing project. So we still are awaiting our unique project code as a result as well. So there's no previous history with this project.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I do have a question on this as well. So it's $40,000 and then 10,000 local funding, right? So what exactly, and it's for space concerns? To increase space? That, do you know what they're doing?
They're renovating offices of FXB Go at the US one.
Right, I
site.
know where it is,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's $40,000 to renovate offices?
It's a federal grant if you look at it.
I know, but it's
So-
still money. So, I mean, I'm just, I don't know. I mean, okay, yeah.
John, are we approving this today or was it?
No, it's-
We're opening it.
So what we could do, Madam Chair, is to ask FXBO to come to the next policy committee meeting and to explain what the renovation is, because we will only be approving it at that meeting. So
Right.
we will ensure that somebody from XBGO comes and explains the project to you.
It'll be on April 25th, is the public hearing, yeah.
Madam Chair, so is the local FAMPO money or is it Fredericksburg money?
No, we don't put any money onto TIP projects except for CMAC, STGB and congestion relief money. So when it says local, it always means the FXB Go funds the local match. They either fund it from the city or from one of the counties. So they have already done that. By the time we get it, they already have an agreed allocation of local match from whoever it comes from.
Chair,
Yes.
So I'm a little confused. It calls resolution 25-09 for a vote today's date. And are you saying we need to table this until our next meeting?
No, this is just, we're gonna have a public hearing on the 21st on this.
So today,
What do we adopt?
we're not adopting. If you read the,
Opening the public.
Right.
yes, if you
Right.
read the agenda, it says directing a public comment. So we are deciding to have a
20-day
public.
Yeah,
comment.
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Got to read the fine print.
There we go.
And that would be great if they could come.
I
and
will
explain
ensure
that a little
that they
bit
have a
more.
representative.
Okay. Supervisor Bonke, do you have any more questions on that? Are you good?
I am good, thank you.
Okay, all right,
Move the consent agenda.
okay.
Second, oh, I can't.
All right. All those in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions?
She
She said aye.
Next, okay. Opposed.
Actually,
No, she's aye, right? She just a little late on there, right? Okay.
some of those things you think we're not allowed to do, they're not in our bylaws, so you are actually allowed to do
What?
them. You can have any two members of the policy committee that can motion or second. They can be from the same
Oh, really?
jurisdiction. There's no, the bylaws don't specify that you're not allowed to do that.
Interesting.
It's very specific about a quorum, but once we've established a quorum, then any person who is a full, so Marcy, for example, can motion and Bob can
That's
second.
interesting.
Even Marcy and Bob.
Don't worry, it won't happen. In fact, sometimes when some of you are grumpy, I have to look at Marcy and go, can you please motion?
I don't think I ever fact checked it because it never really was relevant. You know what I mean? We just always kind of.
Sure.
Right, yeah,
We
it's
always,
right.
yeah. that's
I
funny.
try to let you know.
I want to take
That
my
was Mark
second back.
Pepper because the one who told me and I never checked. I never checked, so I just assumed that.
If anybody ever wants to check, the full bylaws are on the front page of the website, so it's
Yeah.
easy to find,
And I think we had to. we
but I tried
put them
to.
in, but I don't think I ever looked at that particular section with that.
I also try to hint when you're starting to do something that's in contravention of the bylaws, I start getting a little bit like, when I do that, hang on, just slow down.
I feel like you do that often.
Maybe he's just stretching.
We'll have a test on the bylaws the next meeting, right?
Did we vote on this?
Yes, oh,
We
yeah,
did have a motion and a second. I
Yes,
can't remember. if
I
we
did,
voted.
it was unanimous.
Okay, great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, your report.
Thank you. And this is just some information really for you. Nothing that you need to do anything about. Just 5 slides to just tell you about things that are going on that you should be aware of, but nothing that you need to decide tonight. So first slide, please. So we've arranged a workshop to review Smart Scale as a program to look at future rounds. How can we do better next time? How can we improve? I got a call last week when I was ill from the Virginia Highway Commissioner. And he has asked if we could please invite the OIP staff, that's the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment, kind of like VDOT Executive Office. They are the people who score the smart scale projects. And they make a recommendation for which projects should get funding. So they are going to be coming to our workshop to explain how the calculations are all done. The commission is a little concerned that we may have said things like it's a black box at our last meeting, and he would prefer for a full explanation. So Marcy tells me that this was done about 6 years ago at FAMPO, so it's time to do it again.
What, the black box?
The explanation.
Okay.
So we have invited OIP. They will be at our workshop, which will happen after the TAC meeting on the 7th of April. Yeah, and it's a staff level meeting, right? There's no decisions being made. They're just coming to explain how they do all the calculations. So we know roughly the process of how they, deal with congestion, but we don't always know exactly how it's calculated because there's some algorithms and things so they're coming to explain that to us. And we'll let you know how that goes. And then the TAC's going to work on that as well. So we can make some recommendations to you all about what could improve it for us in future. So that is something that we're going to be doing. Next slide. The river crossing, we are not doing anything about the river crossing tonight. We have scheduled the requested CTAC presentation to the policy committee at the next meeting. The CTAC wasn't ready to give us their presentation materials. And so we rather delayed a month to give them more time so that the thing is a little bit more polished and ready for you. The city's not going to be giving feedback on the data center yet. They would give us some feedback at a future meeting. Perhaps we can also get whatever feedback is available at the April meeting. And then the consultant, I had a phone call with this week, and they are ready to give you their recommendations, right, of what they think the best options are for us and how we should proceed. And then it's for you to discuss those recommendations. So I would suggest, Madam Chair, that we do all 3 things next meeting at the same time, because they're all related to the river crossing study. And then you will have, at the end of that meeting, the recommendations from the policy committee, from the consultants, for you all to digest, discuss, think about, and so on. But that's up to you. As you know, I don't make decisions as to what must be on your agenda, but I'm just letting you know we're not doing any of that tonight. We have postponed to give, for example, the CTAC more time and for the city to have more time to see what developments there are with the data center, and the consultant will then come and give you their recommendations.
Okay.
All right.
So, can I just ask, when you guys are ready to do that, like any information, could you send it out like before the meeting, kind of like, or give it to Ian so he can include it in the packet? If there are any supporting documents that you have, if it could be part of the agenda package so that people have time to process it, that's all. But if it's not, if there's nothing and it's just a conversation, then I guess you don't need to send in anything. But I like to get all of the documents,
Like the overlay map.
whatever.
We have that all over the website.
Right, but whatever you're speaking to, we all, I think, know what the overlay looks like, because it's everywhere, right? But if there's anything, we're not having the discussion tonight because you're not ready to have that, which is totally fine. I'd rather not do it until we're ready to kind of pull some trigger on it, right? So, but if there are any documents that you're going to present to the policy committee, if you could provide them to Ian so he could put them in the packet, that would just be nice.
Madam Chair, when
That's
do you
fair.
need those documents by?
They usually go, Wednesday is when you,
The
Wednesday before?
The Wednesday before the policy committee meeting, we always send out the agenda.
If you have
And you
anything,
create the packet at that time.
yeah.
Yeah. So if you have anything, if you don't, whatever,
Right.
I'll liaise with the city and you guys, if you have something, I'll put it in. If you don't, I won't, whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Just any, because it is kind of nice to be able to peruse things prior to us coming in,
For sure.
so that we have time to think about it. I'm not good at knee-jerk type decisions and stuff. So, all right, great. Thank you, Ewan.
Great.
Oh, Drew?
No, I'll wait till the slides.
Okay. Next slide. So this is more complicated, but I'll send this out to you as well, so you can read it at home again. You'll remember we wrote a letter to the secretary concerned about future funding for our roadway network and the fact that congestion is going to grow in future. The secretary wrote back and said, before you meet with me, can you please meet with the staff who do the modeling and so on. So we met with senior staff at central office who do the modeling, and these are just some notes that they sent us at the end of the meeting. So key issues, you know all of this stuff. Stafford, Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania have been experiencing high population growth over 20 years, so it's not a recent thing. The localities, while having east-west connections such as Route 610, Route 17, and Route 3 suffer from a lack of north-south transportation facilities west of I-95. This leads to I-95 and to a lesser extent, Route 1 serving as the region's main street. And they, I think, acknowledge that that's a concern. And despite significant investment in the I-95 corridor, congestion remains an issue, and the highlights are me, not the, don't blame VDOT for that. I just highlighted a couple of sentences because the text gets quite boring. It's all just one color. So congestion remains an issue, and forecast growth in the region looks to continue impacting the transportation network. With respect to, and here's the thing where they maybe have a slightly different view from the FAMPO TAC. With the respect to the socioeconomic data, they think that our forecasted population growth in the model is higher than their recommended best practice. We are the fastest growing region in Virginia, but they still think we've maybe predicted a little bit too much growth, right? That's the general concern that they have. And VDOT uses the Weldon Cooper Center as sort of a guardrail. And if you go above 10% of what Weldon Cooper projects, then they think that you're going too high in your projection. Ours is currently sitting at 12.5% greater than the Weldon Cooper Center. However, TAC representatives from all the jurisdictions looked at the socioeconomic data, the population growth, the jobs growth, and so on. And they did feel that a high population growth for this region is warranted. John and I argued with the city reps, like we didn't bother you with the details, but we pushed down the jobs growth because we felt it was unrealistically high. In 2017, the policy committee members then voted for what data to put in the original model. And it was frankly a bit too high. So John and I tried to push it down a bit. The central office still thinks it's a bit high, right? Next slide. Based on these reviews, we believe the region should revisit the population forecasts and adjust them to 10% of the Weldon Cooper numbers. So they're saying we should drop it by 2.5%. If I let John speak for a minute, he would tell you that we've learned by experience that Weldon Cooper projects figures, and then we have a census, and the census always tends to show our localities exceed the Weldon Cooper estimates. So the census is like a check on Weldon Cooper, and Weldon Cooper is like a check on the census, but we tend to see that Weldon Cooper underestimates our population growth generally. So somewhere in there is the truth. I can't tell you what the future is going to look like exactly. It's a crystal ball. It's, you know. They suggest, though, that we consider scenarios that could be evaluated with the regional model. So what does it look like if we get the population that the model is predicting? What happens if we get a bit less than the model is predicting? What will those impacts be? And we should run some scenarios in the future to understand what happens if we don't get all those people, right? So the consideration of alternative futures may be useful to both the technical committee and the policy committee. Many MPOs in Virginia conduct scenario planning, considering the impacts of multiple scenarios of population and employment growth, assumptions on where the growth occurs within the region in the future, the density of that growth, the types of land uses, also alternative types of improvements to the transportation network, to get a sense of how that could impact performance in the future. And then they say, for example, Hampton Roads and Richmond have done scenario planning to understand their system. So that's just them. We've had the meeting as requested by the policy committee. These are their comments. Basically, they don't think there's anything wrong with the model. They just think we may be on the high side of the population estimates, and maybe we should consider particularly when we do the new LRTP, that we just look at what happens if we don't get those numbers. How will that affect our investments in roads and trains and other things?
Quick question.
Mhm.
These scenarios, is this a new thing that we have been doing? And if not, how have we been faring with our scenarios in the past?
That's a very good question. We are now updated. We have
Exactly.
We update this model now every 5 years with actually VDOT updates it with our inputs, right? So your representatives on the TAC say, we think the population is going to grow by X or Y, the jobs by X or Y and all that sort of jazz. And then we add in the new roadways that you've all built, the intersections that have been upgraded, all that goes into the model. And then every 5 years we review it. Because the model is a predictive tool, and you know about every other predictive tool in your daily lives. It works quite well for 5 years, a little less well for the next 5 years, and then by the time you get to 30 years, it's not so great because things have changed. So that's why every 5 years we review this, and it will be reviewed again in 5 years. So we've just done it, it's finished, and you voted it into being 3-4 months ago. And we will do it again. However, we don't do scenario planning in the model. The model doesn't do scenario planning. It predicts the traffic based on the population and the jobs and the numbers of households and all that. Scenario planning you have to do with a facilitator and a workshop. So I've been suggesting, and some people think it's a good idea, others don't, that we do scenario planning before we build the new long-range transportation plan 2055. The last time it was done at FAMPO, I asked Paul, because it wasn't done since I've been here. The last scenario planning chapter in the long-range plan, I wrote on my laptop based on the model. That's all we did. It's inadequate. It shouldn't be done like that. So I asked Paul, and Paul says that the last time it was done was in 2012. And halfway through, they got fed up with the process and cancelled it. So the last time it was done is 2012, and it wasn't even finished in 2012. So our scenario planning is a bit dated. Paul Anello, the former FAMPO administrator, who's now at Spotsylvania. So it was half done in 2012, and that's very long because the scenarios they talked about then, they're so out of date now, they don't really talk to what's happened since then. And you all know how things have changed since 2012 in the region.
Well, things have changed even in the past year and a half too. So that's why I wonder how much time and brain power do we, use, and to what end? Is this really where we need to be focusing so much? Because what do we get out of it at that point?
The answer is you all will decide. You're going to do it now in July, but you're going to do it in a bigger way when we do it, the LRT 55. You have to decide which projects you're going to fund it in the future. And the way you do that is you adopt a thing called the constrained long range plan. And you've got to make some tough choices because there's going to be X amount of money and X plus 20,000 projects. And so we have to workshop at the TAC, bring your recommendations, and then you debate them and decide on which ones you're going to fund. And we have to put those in the constrained long range plan, because if they're not in the constrained long range plan, like the tip, you can't spend the money. So we're going to do that process at a small scale in July and a much bigger scale about a year later. So the scenario planning tells you theoretically where best to invest your money. And John is going to talk about that just now in another item. But should we spend the money on the big parkways, or should we spend it on the local roads? Should we spend it on I-95? Should we spend it on US 17? So you all need to make that decision, and to guide your decision, you do scenario planning, hopefully with an outside facilitator, not me. You need somebody completely out of our way of thinking so they can suggest where we might have blinkers on.
And Ian, is that,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
that's done on our transportation committee levels, correct?
It will be done with you all
Here,
and TAC members.
right?
The best idea actually is to have you all and the TAC together and to get a facilitator who does the discussion and they ask the questions and then you all debate what the answers should be. And the questions are, okay, what happens if the growth is bigger than we planned? Or alternatively, what if the growth is smaller than we planned? It's a high road, middle road, low road type scenario. What do we do if? Because we aren't able to accurately predict the future. We have estimates and guidelines and so on. And it'll all be your decisions. So best you do what you can to learn about what might be best for the region. Maybe you already know. I don't assume that you aren't familiar with everything in the region.
Weldon Cooper.
Yeah, 1 second. Janet's gonna go and then I'll have you go, Meg.
Thank you.
Does the Weldon Cooper study include, like, what, are they just doing
Yes.
numbers? Just people? They're
Population.
not, but are they looking at taking into account all the development that has been proposed or any of that, like, in that?
I'm gonna
Because
defer to John on your question because he knows a little bit more about this than
Typically know without seeing how that they're projecting their models, but their outputs are basically jurisdiction by jurisdiction. All of your block grants, our model does actually try to predict growth is likely going to occur before the jurisdiction. Try to identify that, but that's also assuming we think that a full jurisdiction is going to grow by this amount and therefore look at the areas within and say, well, that area is built up, so it's not going to grow versus that area is right next prime. We know we have development coming in, we've already had submission. We're expecting growth in that location. So the model does a little bit, but typically with the Weldon Cooper, they're just looking at jurisdictions, but I wouldn't be surprised behind it. A lot, right?
they start off with the Census Bureau's numbers. And then they have algorithms that try to predict that on an annual basis.
so we used Weldon Cooper when I was on school board to try to predict school growth, to see if we needed this new school. And, one of the things, one of my takeaways from that is that they said that beyond 5 years, their numbers were really wispy.
Yeah.
Like, they're just not as, like, beyond 5 years, it's very difficult to predict. So I didn't know if this was different in that, because I think if we're deciding about roads, that the development plays a piece in it
Yeah,
as much as, if not more than, like, just census numbers, no? I
right,
mean,
yeah.
that just.
And we've got development that's been approved since what, 2011, I think we've got some stuff. That
Right.
still hasn't come to fruition.
We have 1980s, so.
Yeah, I mean, so it's really hard.
And the other thing that affects the transportation system is jobs. It's not just population, it's also jobs, because we have this unusual region where 40% of our people work outside of the region. And that's not normal.
Right.
That's unusual.
Well, but that might be changing too. I mean, and that's the thing, is that we used Weldon Cooper years ago. And then the recession hit in 8. And throw that out the window,
Right.
it didn't help. So
Yeah.
it's helpful for short term, but beyond that, it doesn't really do anything.
The Weldon Cooper Center predicted that
It's a nice word.
the current
Yeah.
the current population in the city of Fredericksburg grew in, I think it's the last 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, by 47 people. And we don't think that number's correct, but that's just our opinion, right? I haven't gone to every house and knocked on the door and counted the people, so I can't tell you for a fact. But it does sound like 47 is a really low number to me. And we know for a fact that they don't treat Fredericksburg as a university city. They treat other cities in the state of Virginia as university cities.
Yeah.
And they count appropriately. And in Fredericksburg, they ignore the university like.
And it was 2020 when the students.
And what happens with the Fredericksburg University and Germanna is that the population goes up when all the students are in class. And the population goes down when students go home for Christmas or whatever it is. So it matters when you count.
Mhm.
And so that's why we're a little nervous about what these numbers for the city of Fredericksburg, but I don't have contrary data to say that they're wrong. So I'm not for 1 minute saying, oh, my data is better than theirs.
Yeah, sure.
My quick follow-up would be to Chris's question, how accurate have they been throughout the years?
So John is quite critical of them. I'm trying to be more cautious.
I mean,
So,
you know.
so if you look at the jumps between, say, 2009 and 2010, and then 2019 and even 2020, you see Weldon Cooper jump in that last year to re-establish itself with the census. So often those years right between it just kind of shows that they tend to be a bit more conservative. I think Weldon Cooper is just best to be conservative. Some counties actually have a lot more strong growth. I would say consistent growth paths, like Stafford actually tends to be a little bit more of a 4% growth range, a little bit less, a little bit more. Their swings a little less. Since 1970, like Spotsylvania will jump from 1 to 9% growth. Like it is leaps and jumps. The city's kind of in between that with a little bit of jumps, a little bit of drops here and there, but you see Stafford's a little bit more consistent, but it's constantly always tracking higher than Weldon Cooper. Spotsylvania will beat Weldon Cooper on the long, but it'll go in staggers, and the city of Fredericksburg always trends just a little bit above it.
So
Okay, and Meg had a question, yeah. We can't ignore her.
shout.
Oh, Meg,
Yes. Okay, thank you so much. So I think this is really kind of the most complicated thing that we have to deal with as FAMPO policy members. You know, and it's really a conglomeration of things, because when you look back over since COVID, we can't forget COVID, and that everybody's been teleworking. And for those of us that sit on the VRE board, we now are looking at, you know, we used to have 18,000 riders a day on VRE before COVID, and now we're at 13,000 riders, and we haven't seen that ridership since before COVID. So, you know, when you look at the growth of population, people are changing. They're moving now. There were lots of changes during COVID because people were teleworking, and now, you know, where we had 65% of the people in this region that are commuting north, if they want to keep their jobs, many of them are commuting north again, as the numbers reflect from our VRE numbers that we're seeing every Friday from Rich Dalton, okay? So my other point that I want to throw in here is we also have the big Long Bridge project and the third rail project that's coming. And are we taking this all into account as it relates to future growth, right? And we just heard at our budget hearing last week from our budget director that we are not the fastest growing county in the state of Virginia anymore. It's actually a county south of us now, which we were kind of happy to hear about. Well, I was personally, because I don't think that's where you really want to be, because it creates a lot of additional challenges for you. So I just think, you know, when you look at the Weldon Cooper, it's kind of like, you know, the weather people and the Federal Reserve trying to figure out where rates are going to go and what's the weather going to be tomorrow. There are so many different factors that come into that, and I think it's really a very complicated scenario for planning. And I just want to make sure that we're taking all these things into account, because we've had some very abnormal years with COVID, and now we're coming out of this and we have a different administration. People are being asked to come back to work. So it's a little bit more complicated for our region than it might be for other parts of the United States. Thank you so much, Chair Hayes.
thank you. Crystal, did you?
I was actually just gonna point out the part that Supervisor Bonke brought up about us I think we're like 14 now as far as fastest growing counties in Virginia. So we're not even in the top 5.
The
Um,
region is still.
Or I'm sorry, in the region, but then we also, no, I think he talked about Virginia. Meg, do you remember? I'm pretty sure he said in Virginia, because it was comparing Loudoun County and several others, and that our growth projections are down 5.5% now.
Wow. And you said Caroline is the fastest
Caroline,
growing?
Caroline is the fastest. Yeah, it was Virginia. It was not the region, it was Virginia.
Right, but
That
it's
is
like the
correct.
planning district.
No, this isn't the planning district. This was about our budget. And so,
Right, but
Yeah.
what we're saying, when he talks about the fastest growing region, they're talking about the planning district,
Yeah,
which
sure.
includes Caroline.
yeah,
Correct. Our jurisdictions as individual jurisdictions were almost never the fastest growing jurisdiction in Virginia, but as a region, we're the fastest growing region because many of these other jurisdictions that are a fast growing jurisdiction, they're in a region of low growth. So they're the one shining, or if you don't like growth, the one mess in a low growing region. Whereas our region together as 5 jurisdictions has been for 23 years the fastest growing fastest growing region in Virginia. But individual jurisdictions, we're not always the fastest in Virginia. We're often not 14th, because it fluctuates.
has that changed? I'm just curious how Spotsy's kind of stacked up, if you guys have looked at that at all.
I mean, our growth is not like, when you said 9%, I don't recall ever seeing 9% in growth.
Spotsy fluctuates a lot more than the other jurisdictions. Some years it shoots the lights out. There was one year during
It's not 5.5.
There was one year during COVID when Spotsy was outrageously fast growth. Paul was telling us at the TAC meeting about the numbers of applications for new construction of houses and the number of population figures and so on. And then it cooled down again, right? Spotsy varies a lot. It depends which year. Some years in COVID, it was massive growth. Other years, it was slower growth. It's not consistent. Stafford is more consistent.
Yeah, I mean, in our budget, I don't think there's, I mean, Chris, you could probably speak to this, or Drew, but I don't recall us ever being that high when we talked about it in our budget. It's been pretty consistent. Like
It's been a while too, but
4%, 2-3%.
But I'm also concerned too that we're taking a planning district that is fast growing because of a little county, no offense to Caroline, and then basing what FAMPO does, which doesn't include those guys.
Right.
Or we're not,
Caroline's growth is very recent.
okay,
The region's growth is 23 years long. Caroline wasn't a big part of that growth until 2 years ago.
I know, but I mean, if you cut out Caroline and you cut out King George, what do the 3 of us have? If Stafford is slowing and we're kind of steady and you guys just added 47 people, what does that actually look like as opposed to if you throw in Caroline and King George with the,
The 2020 census did not show any of our jurisdictions slowing down. So unless the slowdown has happened in the last 24, 48 months, you're still growing.
And John had
That's what.
something to
yeah,
add.
added it. Oh, sorry.
I would quietly say we add Fredericksburg to our region every 5-ish years
Yeah.
consistently.
So the size of Fredericksburg as a city, we add that amount of people to the region every 5 years. I showed you this about.
that's not,
Yeah.
that's not a lot, no offense, but it's, I mean,
The district.
Right.
It's
You
true.
had a question?
when you can say 47 people,
Okay. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, but. And 9.
Yeah, no.
Total people
Well,
in Fredericksburg.
Doesn't it? Anyway,
you add that
Do you want to go?
every
Sure.
5 years, that's 5,000
Real
a
quick,
year
in terms of,
in this big asset.
I'm not there.
okay. This is probably unpopular about what I was thinking in terms of, the projects that we have. I was just waiting. No, you're fine. Because I wanted you to also chime in on this, the projects that we have. You mentioned the CPAC commissioners, and I know some of them have been on there for a while. And so they acquired experience, and I'm thinking, you said that you were gonna have like someone with us, an advisor or someone from out of the county to work on your strategic planning or
So,
decisions on.
if we decide to do scenario planning, I'm just saying that we should have somebody who's an expert in scenario planning to facilitate the workshop. They'll be more neutral, right?
I
And
think we need more than just scenario planning and one person, because I think we're missing on, it's like when we talk about local projects versus, I heard you mention I-95. I personally think these I-95 large projects, they shouldn't be for us to decide. This is the whole America comes across I-95 from Boston all the way to Florida. Why are we spending our hard-earned taxpaying money for I-95? And I think that we need to concentrate on local projects, for example, Drew here, like, instead of fighting for the same pot, it's like, your turn, your turn, your turn. What's big? What keeps you up at night? I mean, working together, that's what regional to me sounds like, but I don't know, I'm new, I'm trying to learn and find out what it is that we're doing here, what is our strategic plan? What are the major things? Seems like I just asked you about the money pots. I would like to see what that looks like, so we'll know what we have. I just don't feel that, we're there, and maybe I'm just alone, I don't know, then, you're new here too, so.
I mean.
Compared to,
Well, I'm new in
Okay.
terms of, I was alternate.
Yeah.
So. that's what I'm
compared to your jurisdictional budgets, the money we have is very tiny. So we don't actually have it. So
saying.
I hope you're not looking for this. Here's the money. We'll show you, but it's not much money. It's about 6 million a year. That's what we have.
It's not a lot. And then Will had a question too.
It's not so much a question as a comment. I mean, what I hear here is a lot of uncertainty about the process of predicting and growth and its impact on transportation. So to my mind, that for me, that's a good reason to undertake a more exhaustive scenario planning study, right? Because we don't want to be just planning for the one outcome that the model spits out, right? Because what I'm hearing for everybody say is you not necessarily have a lot of confidence in that one model, right? So that to me, if Ian is suggesting a process that's going to help us develop plans for high, medium, and low growth scenarios, then that strikes me as something that's worth our time and money, because what I hear here is that don't have a lot of certainty about whether we're hitting the high, medium, or low growth scenarios. So we should have sort of a sense around the community, around the table of what that looks like, because we don't actually.
Right.
So, I mean, that, to me, that's
Yeah.
seems like a good reason to spend our time and money to Chris's point at the beginning on this kind of exercise.
Right.
I think that's a good.
It's a small amount of money when you compare with the millions you're going to put into these projects. So
Right. Okay.
next slide.
Last slide.
Yeah, there's another slide. It's orange. There we go. Okay, so month we're going to give you our draft work program for the next financial year. These things roll on from year to year. So we basically take the one we had last year, we tweak it, we add a few little things, we remove things that are finished. We'll bring you the draft to look at next month, and then you'll have a month to think about it, and then we'll approve it the following month. The budget, I'm busy writing the FAMPO portion of it. Remember that the FAMPO budget is not approved by FAMPO as an independent item. It's rolled up into the GWRC budget. The GWRC approves that as a group. So we're not going to approve a budget. I'm just letting you know, we have new members. You will approve the work program. GWRC will approve the combined budget of all the entities at their meeting. We've been working with the rural localities, just for your information. There aren't any rural localities here. But we're talking to them about developing a technical advisory committee, just like our tech, but for the rural localities, because what's been happening is they drive all the way here and not a single item on the agenda has got anything to do with a rural locality. So it kind of becomes a waste of their time. So we think a smaller meeting with them under GWRC, and we can handle the rural work program just with them. Don't bother you with it, and we don't bother them with CMAQ money, because they don't get any of it. So why should they be part of the arguments and the debate and whatever else? And then finally, some bad news. Can't give this to you now because we just got it at like, John, 11 o'clock this morning or something. John rushed in it. No, it was later. It was when we were having lunch. Anyway, lunchtime today, we got our CMAQ STGB allocations, which is what you're asking about. And I must tell you, there's some bad news. There's a reduction in the amount we're getting this cycle. The really bad news is that they have reduced. Listen carefully because it's complicated. We get money every year, but we don't get money for this year. We get money for 5 or 6 years, 6 years into the future. So we allocate this year money for 2031, right? And then next year we'll allocate money for 2032. So we're working 6 years in advance. But as happens, they can take that money away before it's spent. So we are now in a situation where they notified us today that they're reducing the money in the intervening years between now and 2031 by $2 million. So we've already given you that money in quotes, right? We've allocated money to your projects because last cycle we got $3 million more than we expected, but we allocated it. Now the state is taking $2 million of that back. And our allocation for this year, for 1 year, which is the year 2031, is $200 and some thousand less than what we got for 2030 last time. So the intervening years from now until 2031, they're asking us to scale back $2 million worth. And the new year, which is 2031, they're giving us 230,000 or something less than we got.
So Ian, do we need to then look at what we have and reevaluate that?
So what we're gonna do, they're also, and it's not Marcy's fault, right? It's VDOT, but it's not Marcy, it's at a higher level. They told us, can we please do it in 9 days? And so I wrote for staff and I said, that's not possible, because first of all, we as staff don't have authority to remove $2 million from project. You guys have the authority and you don't have any numbers to look at. So we will take it to the TAC. We'll ask the tax input on where we should roll back. And then we'll ask the TAC to make a recommendation to you. You will then have time to think about it. And then you will adopt a new package, which will send to VDOT and it will be approved by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. There's a long email explaining why there's less money. I'm struggling to understand 2/3 of it. The first third is easy because we're getting less money from the federal government. That's an easy answer. The next two-thirds of the email involved scheduling of projects and inflation and availability and a whole bunch of concepts, which if you want to have a bash at explaining, I certainly looked at it. We'll send it to you as well. Yeah, we'll send you all the documentation.
So will you during our next meeting, is that a discussion that we need to have? then?
Yes.
So this is something we need to add to our next meeting
Yes.
to figure out what we're gonna scale back.
The TAC will first have a look at it, and the TAC will typically make recommendations. There might be projects that people don't want anymore, so we can remove them. Or we might be able to use the 2031 money for 2030 projects, so we can substitute. So if we take the money off of 2030, we can give it back with 2031 money, for example. So you might not lose the money on your project, but your project might be delayed by 1 year.
Okay, so we all
So we'll
need
come to you with a proposal. It's, I said to VDOT, I can't rush this because you need time. I'm not gonna rush you with, hey, in 9 days I have to do this. I'm just not gonna do it. And
Okay,
the draft budget is not that important anyway. It's the final budget that really matters, which the CTB, one of which is sitting over there, will vote for. So I'm telling you, we'll do a proper process. We'll bring you proper numbers. We'll bring you the rationale, the letter, and the recommendation of the TAC as to the best way to resolve it. We've still got 6 million new money, right? But they're taking 2 million away from the old money. So really, we've only got 4 million, is what I'm saying to you. We weren't meant to allocate money this year. We were only meant to allocate money next year. So we will need the TAC to just think through all of this and give you a recommendation, because there's lots of moving parts to Dr. Young's point. Lots of moving parts. And I'm only telling you this because I didn't want to ignore the fact that we were told this morning. But I said to VDOT, I'm not going to give you an answer in 9 days because that would be stupid. So we're going to give you time. We're going to give the TAC time. We'll come to you with recommendations.
okay,
And then you'll make a decision.
sounds good.
You don't even need to make the decision at the next meeting. you can get the information at the next meeting and make the decision in the following meeting. And
Okay.
then I will the next morning send it to VDOT with a final decision. So you have time.
Okay,
I just wanted to give you the bad news up front so that we could be in a better mood next time when I bring you the solutions. Hopefully.
let the TAC take this on. Yes,
So when do you craft your administrator report?
I usually do it on the Friday before the meeting.
Some of these items are things that if we could get them ahead of time, I would be asking questions of my long range planning folks, our staff and Paul and others. And to come to this meeting and have a more participatory meeting, give, input. Because I feel like when you surprise us with this, and a lot of it is surprise, you can't help this kind of stuff happening.
Yeah, 12 o'clock
Last minute.
today. We
Yeah,
got
you get the good news, right?
the good.
But some of the things,
You want time
it's
to
gonna fall off the
discuss.
table
Yeah.
because not, the next meeting's gonna come, the next agenda's gonna come, and these things are, this stuff that's important right now won't be on my radar, whereas we can get a little bit of a prime the pump a little bit.
I could do that. Typically what
That's what the things you can.
Yeah,
share this.
I will happily do that. What typically happens with this is that I just give you new information. That then goes through a process of to the TAC, we come up with proposals, we bring you a document. So this is just sort of a headline, like, by the way, this is going on. But if you would like more detail, then maybe sometimes I can delay telling you until we've
Well,
done
if you could,
some work.
if you mind going to the beginning of the slides and just click through them.
So this is just
Okay,
letting you know
that's-
we're
that's
having a
good.
workshop.
Next slide, please. That's kind of boilerplate stuff right there, although that was a little bit, I mean, we can handle that in real time. Next slide, please. This is kind of nerdy in the weeds things. I get it. This is probably the best time to talk about it right now. But there might be something else in the next administrative report that I could ask my staff about or ask our staff about. And then the next slide. Yeah, I just.
That's the second part of.
Second part of that, and then you only had one more after that.
Yeah, the last one is just the things that are
Yeah.
happening, so you know what's coming.
I don't mean to sound like a critique, because it's not, it's just that
No, no.
if there are certain things that, like anything to do with long range planning, I would ask Jake and Paul and our planning staff, hey, this is how FAMPO is seeing things. How are we seeing, is there anything I can bring to the meeting? Discuss from a SPOTSy perspective
Sure.
that can help. So, because otherwise, like I said, I'm gonna leave here and not carry this mail to my staff, et cetera. So, if you don't mind. Thanks.
Bear that in mind for the future slides.
all right. And that's your report, right?
That's it.
Okay, and now we're on to action and discussion items. 9A is FAMPO Complete Street Project Update, Carrie.
Yes, good evening. Give you a brief update on this. A complete streets plan for FAMPO. This is a project that I'm working on with Lita, our GIS analyst. Next slide. Okay, so much of the work we've been doing on this is basically just updating our inventory on your plans and your localities, your planned projects, your funded projects, to make sure that we have a full picture of what you guys are doing. We're also reviewing your comp plans, your bike plans, your transit strategic plans, to make sure that we understand what everybody in the region is doing. And we're currently working on that. You can see that's in progress. We've mostly completed updating our GIS layers, and we're sending it all out to you for your review and correction. And then basically we're working on everything else. And as soon as we have more to show you, we will be showing you that.
Awesome.
That's basically all we're doing.
Anybody? Oh, well,
I'm just curious, where do those GIS layers live, and are they accessible to us? That's something I would love to take a look at.
Well,
if
they
they're
live
ready.
on our server.
Is that publicly accessible?
Not yet, but when we
Okay.
have a plan, you'll be able to review it.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly.
We were actually collecting the GIS layers from all of your jurisdictions.
Yeah.
So trying to glue them together so that we can see, well, where does this sidewalk actually go?
I would love to be able to play with that. That seems like it would be a really useful tool for FAMPO.
Maybe we should make a map, get Lita thinking about an online map like the one Connor, great.
We have a project, we've been working with Jacob actually on his grand interactive maps. So
Okay.
we've got lots of things going on.
Fantastic.
All right,
Right.
great, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, and we will go to the future integrated network analysis.
Leaders out tonight, so John is doing this. Just by way of introduction, there is a point to this, but this is our final presentation on this concept, right? We call it future integrated network analysis. Basic idea is, where have we been spending money? Is it working for us? Is it going to solve our congestion problems and our connectivity problems? And what should we bear in mind to Mr. Mullen's point of view? What should we take from this when we review the constrained list of projects in July? So all of this is prelude to what we will ask you to do in July and August.
Okay.
It's just that background information. The model has told us a few things. What has it told us? Also, the cost of the inflation cost of projects has been ridiculous.
All right.
What does that tell us about the future of our projects?
Because
John.
John's gonna,
Don't worry, during the administrator's report, I was kind of like saying spoilers in the back. Listen, we're kind of jumping there. So again, this is the future integrated network analysis. Lydia's actually been doing a lot of the behind the scenes, kind of like the Lita showed tonight. So let's go to the next slide. So what we're doing and why we're doing this is that this is going to feed into those long range plans, and particularly that constrained long range planning list. And what we're looking for in this analysis is going back and looking at our previous one, using our new model, because the old model was done in 2017, a while ago. We have now the new model, more aggressive growth measures, but it allows us to start looking at it. We have better idea post-COVID of what is going on in the region, where the growth pressures are, and we're saying, okay, is our current TIP projects or the projects that we're funding in the next 6 years, are they kind of going how they should? Are they impacting our network? Or is what we have in our long range plans future out also having those same impacts? So again, we're looking at the CLRP to address congestion as the primary vote, and then evaluate for affordability, because we'll get to that nice little fun note in a minute. So next slide.
Chris, just I'm being very naughty and interrupting him, but this answers a question that you often ask us. Are we spending our money on the right thing? Right? And this is an attempt to say, well, what's the
Wouldn't tell you.
So I'll jump to the big one. If we look at our CLRP and what we're spending our money on capacity improving items, 2/3 of our budget is going into the interstate, or at least our TIP. And as a result, it's not the worst offender on our congestion. We start looking at the miles traveled and the hours spent as a result, the congestion delay. However, our principal arterials are the kind of the leading the show, and only 3% of our capacity improvement budget is actually being spent on those. Major arterials, we have a little bit more spending and kind of nudges it down. And although the major collectors and local, they don't have as much, they're the biggest growth areas. So they have kind of the capacity to grow into a lot of those, but they're still starting to hit their constraints as well, although we're not spending as much on those. And that's kind of an important takeaway, because if you go to the next slide, when we start looking, ooh, that is a fuzzy map. Okay. I got relying on the nice big TV.
You can see it. We can see it better than you
When
could.
we start looking at it, you can see that there's actually kind of a tale of a couple of jurisdictions happening here within our original level. You see the interstate and the purple primary arterials here, but particularly Stafford has a lot more local roads and local connectors. Spotsylvania has a little bit more of the blow here, and that's where you're starting to see the minor arterials and major arterials. And so when we start seeing the jumps and differences, we're actually seeing that happening a little bit between the jurisdictions, and Fredericksburg's kind of coming together in the middle with a little bit of everything. But we see extreme congestion on a lot of our major roads. 1795 is normal. But if we go to the next slide, you start having other streets that are going to have a lot more congestion, and particularly when you get into local minor congestion roads, you start seeing little things kind of building up where the congestion is very bad. At 0.85, we consider that worse. That's probably worse than what, Route 317 at rush hour currently is. So we're seeing that across the board, depending on the road types and where it is in the jurisdiction that we're seeing that consistent problem showing up, that we're still hitting congestion in our 2050 model. Next slide. If we look at where we've currently spent on our interstate, within the model, if it's green, it's either built, being built, or it's about to be built. If it's in blue, we probably still haven't found all the money yet. So that's the I-95 widening in Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania, as well as the new Harrison Interchange. But a lot of our interstate projects are already built, ready, and working in them now, as well as in the model. If we go to the next slide, you start seeing our arterials and major arterials. There's a whole lot more blue. This means we haven't quite found the money to get it to the point of where it is. There might be a couple of projects kind of here with like arterial winding where we wind a section, but not the whole thing that's in our model. So there's going to be bits and improvements, but we still kind of consider that outstanding. If you go to the next slide, our collectors and minor collectors, we still have a lot of blue. These are the big capacity improvements. This is what makes the model seem less dire. We'll have a lot of things where it's not to the point of being built, funded and then built. So that leads us into the next question. All right, next slide.
That Anna Point extension, I think that amount is wrong.
Oh, actually, use that because it just went into the tip. So when I'm gonna do the, I'll say this. When we're doing our cost estimates, yes, cost estimates, we start with this number, then do it. I think in the tip it's 59. I think our estimate for the project was 61. So we're within a few $1 million. That's when we can see little sections of that. We're very happy.
This is just the reason why the number here is not as big as the number you have is that's the number that we put into the constrained long range plan, and you can see how inadequate it is, because that's what we said it was going to cost when we did this, and it's now costing double that.
But it's good that we can validate it. So next question. This is when we did.
And that's why.
And cost increases have since hit. So I always like this one is what happens if it circle comes back down the other way.
So everything to the right of that line is why we can't get out of congestion, because we predicted the costs where the red line intersects with the graph, and then everything went up a ridiculously high inflation rate. So now the things that we think are costing 30 million, they're costing 60 million. And that's the problem we're in now, is that the remainder of the constrained long range plan list of projects, we can't afford them because that happened.
So next slide, I'll show my work. I won't be Weldon Cooper and hide it behind. We did 4 simple forecasts.
Don't ever apply for a job there. They're not going to give you one.
It's the University of Virginia. But in any case, here's my notes. Basically, I went ahead and calculated the cost inflation since 21 to 24 as known. I assume known up to 2030 because we're already programming that money and we kind of have the cost estimates for that. And then I forecasted from 2030 to 2050 and along a couple of different ranges. Just note, VDOT says use about 3.03% for their things. So we're intentionally going a little bit wider of each of that so we can get a better gauge and around, as well as any projects that aren't funded. I still looked at when we're expected to deliver them and put them in 2033, 2038, and 2050 respectively. So next slide. Because we have a lot of our projects in that 2050 range, when we're doing the cost escalations, we see a whole lot more cost. As in, that interstate project, a lot of those big projects, they're near term, they're done, they're over with. But the downside is that's also our big projects too. So we're kind of removing them all. But we have a whole lot of other projects, particularly local, collector, and minor arterial projects that are remaining on the books. And even then, some of them are just 2050-ish. So we see that cost escalation building up. So right now, if we look at cost estimates, less than half of our cost is in that far years. When we apply the kind of a medium high rate, we're saying over 50% of that cost in our current constrained long range plan is in the outer years. And when we're looking at it, we're seeing a consistent range that our funded projects are going to kind of land into the $6 to $7 million range, or sorry, $1 billion range. Ooh, we got a couple of zeros there. And that's going to be a major concern looking on, because these aren't the big projects that we've already done and coming in and building up. This is everything else. So we're almost getting to the point where small intersection improvements, which is a lot of what our existing plan is, becomes very expensive. And we don't see the impacts on the model as so much because the model kind of assumes the intersections are working. So next slide. So again, this is where we were in 2021. This is what we had estimated the cost to complete. We looked at in 2021, they looked at the cost of it plus inflation and the year that it's expected, and it goes up a little. If I take the most conservative linear regression model, we're still over 5 billion, or 5 billion, well over 5 billion. VDOT or 2.5 is probably a more conservative one. I would say it's probably somewhere in between here. VDOT's kind of in this range, so right here. But we're still building up until over 8 billion, potentially, if inflation goes at a very high rate.
So you always ask us, what is the executive summary? So the executive summary is, we estimated that bar chart on the left, and one of those 4 big ones on the right is going to be reality. So we can't afford the things in our CLRP. It's problematic.
So if the constrained long range plan is going to remain stable and say we only have X amount of money, then you're going to have to bring some of these bar charts down. So
Next.
that's it.
Madam Chair,
Chair.
Yes.
quick question, in terms of, why would sorry, what? Why would the models not be able to, add in intersections that don't exist? Like, isn't there a way to tell it there's no right turn or left turn yet? Like, because
So
it
there's
don't
deep
exist?
intersection models on our large range model. They kind of assume that the bottleneck isn't the intersection. So it kind of builds in kind of an assumption that the intersections themselves can handle the capacity of which they're being operated. So basically always kind of gives you the best case scenario through a lot of the intersections.
There's no way to put that in there though, because then it's not reality. It's like, sorry?
The answer's complicated. The answer is that the travel demand model that VDOT uses throughout the state, and it's used across the United States in every DOT. It only reflects capacity improvements. What I mean by that is, if you add a lane, it shows how that's going to improve your situation. So if you add capacity, the model shows you what happens. If it doesn't, if you change the signal timing, the model doesn't know about that. It doesn't know what to do with that level of detail. If you want that level of detail, we have a different model, which there are 2 versions of it, Vism or Synchro, but VDOT doesn't maintain a model of that because it's used only when we do a specific intersection study or a specific roadway study. So we don't maintain a model like that for every intersection in the entire region because it's pricey to do that. So we have the general model, which we call the travel demand model, which tells you about capacity. It's volume to capacity. So if the volume goes up because of your population going up, or the jobs going up, or the households going up, or something else, what does that do to the capacity of your roads to handle that number of vehicles? So it handles the big picture quite well. What it doesn't handle very well is an intersection, because if you change the signal timing, it might increase the throughput of vehicles, but you're not actually adding a lane. So you're not actually adding physical capacity. And so because of that, this particular model won't handle those sorts of changes very well.
So let me ask a question. So this might be a stupid question, but so let's say you have a big development area that you've got and it's proffered different things that are gonna be improved by the developer. Is that stuff taken into consideration when you run these models?
If it is a capacity increase, like a new lane, then yes. If it, and we've got experts sitting right here, engineers who can tell you a more detailed answer than me. If it's a capacity increase, the model will be updated to reflect the capacity increase. But if you're just changing signal timing or putting sidewalks or bike paths, this travel demand model will not deal with those things.
Right, so I guess my question is, you know, when we have different things that are coming through and they proffer a turn lane or, you know, something of that nature. I mean, if you're not taking into, because that would in effect, increased capacity, right? Because if you have a turn lane, you're not constrained on that road. So I'm just wondering, like, is our data not taking into consideration that then?
It is, so what the model is doing, it knows that if a 4-lane road and a 6-lane road are coming together, X many folks are gonna turn and change this line. It's assuming that the intersection's operating efficiently already. There's no queue-back spilling that may block another road further back. Like, for example, that can happen. The model is not looking for that, or if you're having to sit through 6 rotations of the light because the timing's off or it's not optimal. It's looking at is how much vehicles can that roadway handle through it and then to the turn. So it knows that 6 lanes road and then 1 lane road, 6 lanes are going to go that way, and some of it's going to peel off, but it's not going to be looking at that. Okay, that one small peel off, the queue depth is insufficient, so it drops back and like kind of inhibits 1 lane. It's not really looking at that. So it's looking at folks are being able to go and clear through and how they break up along the network as it goes down. So you can actually see where the models we see to a red line and then it hits another road and that becomes yellow. Then all of a sudden that one becomes also yellow as well. So it knows that's peeling, pulling off, but it's just not looking at that.
So
the
the thing you
answer is
must,
no,
the thing you must remember,
Just make a comment back on what I'm asking, because you're asking the same thing, you're following up on what I'm asking. And the answer is no. My concern is we have all these developers and development that's supposed to have a transportation impact study completed. And I'm hearing on one side that you may or may not know, based on a question we asked earlier, that that information is not taken into these studies because you're not aware of them. You're taking census, you're taking, number of cars, but there's more to the traffic. If we're talking about traffic, there's more. If Route 1 is going to be developed and, more lanes and left turns and right turns, that needs to be taken into consideration. That's why I asked that question. And
so I'm gonna give you an explanation and then I'm gonna look at VDOT to tell me if I'm right or wrong. So feel free to contradict me. I will not be offended whatsoever. I really try my best for FAMPO. Some of you think I have strange motives. I'm here to serve all of you, and I honestly will try and give you the best information I can, but I'm happy to be told
yield.
I'm wrong. Because it's about getting the best for the region. It's not about my view. But I would say that adding a short turn lane has a very limited impact on the total roadway network. It's not going to give you massive improvements if a developer says, hey, I'll put a little bit of a turn lane here. It has very limited and very local impact. This travel demand model is looking at the whole neighborhood and going, how many cars can this roadway network cope with and how many are we currently expecting? And when that reaches capacity, a little improvement is not going to fix it. This travel demand model that VDOT maintains looks at the big picture and it warns you of a coming crisis in the big picture. Your developer is not looking at the big picture. He's looking at his little intersection and he says to you, don't worry, I'll fix it. I'll give you a turn lane. And when that happens, I roll my eyes at VDOT because they have to approve these things. And we know, and you all know, that that little turn lane is not going to have a major impact. It's not going to take away the big transportation problem. It's going to improve that little traffic light so that you can get more quickly through that traffic light. But those cars are going to mount up over time. Every house, every factory, every Dominion center, every whatever the heck you build,
Okay,
it mounts up.
then I do have a question for that. Then what we're doing is we're just looking at capacity of roads and not movement of traffic.
We are looking at the total movement. We can look at the little local movements with Vism or Synchro or whatever, but this model is looking at the bigger picture because it's about capacity. Because what you
I'm sorry, it's the capacity of the roads that exist.
and
it's
the
not about
ones we get and the ones we're going to build.
Yeah, projecting future.
So it's about how can we increase the capacity on these roads, not how can we move the cars in a more efficient way, because just capacity is not necessarily the best way. For example, we're talking about a bridge crossing. the traffic model or, that we're talking about would never think of adding that. Because that's a new connection. It's not a capacity issue.
And that's why we get a consultant or VDOT's internal department to run the model, having built the bridge as if it's already been built into the model, and then we run it again to see, does that help? So when we have a new project, we build it. And just to correct something earlier, when a new project is built, we ask VDOT to add it to the model. If it's a capacity issue, if it's a traffic light change, we don't bother because it has a limited impact. What I'm trying to say is those improvements that put more cars through, they're helpful, but they're localized. The improvement is only in that local area. It
Right,
doesn't
but-
help the general movement of people from one jurisdiction to another.
Well, it does if you have multiple local
Because
fixes.
that car, well, yes, but you've got to have a lot of them.
Well, but see, what I'm saying is we keep doing the same thing, which is wider roads, wider roads, wider roads, wider roads, and we still have traffic. And then we sit back and go, well, why do we have traffic? Well, we have wide roads, we have the capacity. We're missing something, is the point. And so when we came up with, whoever came up with the bridge idea and the connection, that was a new way to move traffic through and around.
To Wegmans.
So who, all right, and so who is getting, or who is sitting there thinking, let me put it this way. How can we get somebody to sit there and think, what is a better way to do that? We've talked about that, VDOT down in Massaponax. Instead of widening Route 1 to 13 lanes or whatever they want to do to handle the traffic, they're doing that turn thing that just got, yeah, thank you. It seems to me like that is what we need to be moving more into because, 2050 is just, it's not gonna work. It's just not gonna work. We don't have enough money. It just does, it's not gonna happen. So these alternate ways of moving traffic, we need to focus on that more.
What?
And how can we focus on that more? That's what I'm saying. If we keep looking at the same model that doesn't even take into account that intersections are slowing down traffic, then how can we get to a point where we have connection roads that will,
Okay, so you're saying you're asking two different questions, and I want to answer them both quickly. The first one is that
actually,
the local improvements do work, but they only work in that local area, right? And eventually what happens, and we're seeing this on Route 3. Route 3 will answer your questions very well. Because we are all the time upgrading intersections on Route 3, but we never get to ultimate success because those improvements make small improvements at that location. And then the traffic moves to the next traffic light, but now that one's got overcapacity. So then we fix that one, right? And then we fix another one. But eventually you get to the point where we've done as many fixes as we can, and we're now at capacity because there's not enough space on the road for any more cars. Tweaking the intersection will not work.
but
So if for a while we can make these fixes and tweak, and eventually we've either got to add a lane or build a new roadway elsewhere. The second question you're asking is answered kind of by that slide I did right in my presentation from VDOT's modeling people. They said the network in our region is limited because we're relying too much on US 1 and I-95. And so, to your point, we need other roads rather than adding more and more lanes. We need other ways to get there. Maybe a bus, maybe we need a new roadway, maybe we need a new bridge, maybe we need to focus new development in certain areas and not other areas because the roadways there can't handle the development. Now, I don't want to get into that because I'm not Spotsylvania.
Squirming
I
over
know
here.
Spotsylvania is going to hit me on the head if I mention the D word, so I won't say the D word, but I'm saying that you are correct that we mustn't do the same thing over and over and over again. But by using this model, which some people think is not good enough, we already know that if you build the Harrison interchange, you're going to alleviate the pressure on Route 3. We've already proved that with the model, right? We just don't right now have $150 million or $200 million to do it, but that is the fix.
But I would say on Route 3, we have a glaring example of doing one thing and not the other, which was we improved the intersections, absolutely. we did not make one new connection from Route 3. We had a great idea to come down from the mall, take it to Harrison and get a new north-south.
Yes,
That was scrapped.
that's a pity.
I wasn't on the board at that time, it was previous board, but it was totally scrapped.
That's a pity.
But that is the sort of the release valve that you need along these roadways, because if not, everybody's heading down the beautiful 12-lane road to get to the 2-lane road to make a left.
Correct.
So, and I'm bringing that up as discussion because we don't have the money. It still gets worse. So how can we do it better?
And that's the frustrating part too, Bob, go ahead.
I will just share one point with Mr. Yakubowski. Your 12-lane road will invite 14 cars. Your 12-lane road,
Mhm.
the next morning will invite 14 cars. By the afternoon, it'll be 16. The next day it will be 18. By the afternoon, it's 24. The next day it's 48. Because what you're doing is you're inducing demand by telling everyone that road is the place to be. So people who avoided that road before and went a different way. So you're actually inducing more true. So that's, you asked the question, how come when we widen capacity?
Oh, no, I know why we
No,
run capacity, but the problem is that there's no other way to go. That's what we're missing in the whole thing.
And
Is
I've been there 5 years, and I think that is the problem in our region, is that we are focusing all of the traffic in too few spaces. There is no,
Land use, limited road network.
there you go.
It's land use and limited road network.
and they're not,
You were to
and
pull
they're
that map up,
and they're never connected.
if you were to pull that map up before and just blindly just say, let's draw lines.
Mhm.
Now there's battlefields and military bases and all sorts of stuff and.
And a river and
Clean,
Right.
but if you were to blindly redraw the network with the roadways and just say, well, we gotta connect that blue and that purple and that purple and that purple, and you just had a free hand to do so.
Mhm.
Okay, but there's all sorts of other things. There's preferences to say, this county wants to have a low density
Yep.
issue, or that county wants to have this portion be higher density, lower density, where you would put that road would then create high density development.
Right.
So your connectivity would go against the land use preferences, even though that would be the number one place to build the road, but then it would flip the characteristics of the community. But that's what you're gonna be up against in many of these.
And the problem is the characteristic of the communities can be changed regardless. And we won't have the roads to do it.
It's,
Yeah, because we had that argument with the outer connector years and years and years ago, and every other road. Stafford did a great thing with your Mine Road, north-south connection. Now you actually have one. How long did it take? I mean, that's 20 years past,
A lot of traffic.
we have
now.
a portion, we now need the next portion of that.
but it's a relief valve.
Very much relief.
Yeah.
of 95.
But we have to build the
3
next
miles.
part of that link. Personally, I'm concerned about currently I'm not too worried. I'm worried about the future of Stafford in particular because of that. That first piece works, the next piece is missing.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Don.
No, that, I mean, my concern is every meeting, we talk about the same thing,
Yeah.
right?
We're finished with this presentation.
No, but I mean, and no offense to anybody, I mean,
Okay.
it's the same,
Problem.
it's the same problem over and over and over and over again, and all we know is we don't have any money. And so, I mean, maybe we need to just think differently, cause I don't know what it is, and then when we have developers come before us with projects, and there is a traffic impact analysis, and we see that, oh, the road's gonna stay at a D, even with this improvement, or even get worse, right? I mean, we're not asking for proffers, they're so generous and everything that they give us.
The number of.
Um,
cars they're telling us that.
but-
it's gonna be in the road.
And I'm just speaking for myself, sitting on and looking at the project and looking at what it's gonna bring versus what it's gonna suck off off what our resources, and then we can only request so much, or they can only give so much, and it really doesn't do us any good. You know what I mean? So I mean, I feel like we're in a no-win situation.
And the thing with the development too, is that when they do their impact analysis, they have a certain area that they look at. Well, you have enough growth over here, everybody's heading to the interstate. All that traffic still hits there. It might look fine in their bubble, but beyond their bubble is where it's impacting also.
Right.
And we can't take, I mean, it's very difficult to take that all in. What it comes down to is money and planning and having, and actually having the political will to do some of the stuff, which,
Stuff that we have here is old,
That,
20 years ago.
oh, easily, yeah, yeah,
So what we're looking at right now, we can't do the same thing for
Right.
20 years going forward.
Right.
So we need to make good decisions with people that know what we're doing.
the illustration to your point, the brilliant illustration, it's unfortunate, but is the new development of, is it 2,500 houses or something that they want to build right on the Spotsy border, but over the border in Orange
Oh, and
County?
Orange, yeah,
That's the perfect example, because you are realizing already beforehand what the impact's going to be.
right.
It's not the little intersection around that new develop that matters.
it's all the way out.
It's that the whole of Route 3 is going to be impacted by all those additional vehicles,
Mhm.
trips to school. That's,
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the problem. And unfortunately, as I don't know who said it, people are going to move here, which is why, yes, our model's predicting a little higher population, but you know what? We've always had more growth than people expected, and it happens over and over and over again. And then you all are concerned because we can't fix it with a quick turn lane.
Well, we weren't competing to fix, I mean, the federal government, we're funding things that should be paid for by federal government. Just because it is 95 and 1 are our main roads, doesn't mean we should be fixing those roads.
right.
And they take all the priority. So,
I mean, I know we've talked a lot about connections. I mean, Chris talks a lot about that in here, right? Well, no, I mean, that's been,
not that much, do I? Sorry.
no, I mean,
Talk a lot about.
you do,
About that, okay.
and giving you a compliment,
thank you.
actually, so.
Not used to getting those.
But, you know,
That's what it is, yeah.
considering the grim financial thing that we're faced with right now, and the fact that we're already seeing clawback of some money. I mean, maybe we do have to, like, go back and figure out where's the most bang we can get for our buck, and
Toll.
toll roads.
toll roads.
And this presentation, we've done this over 4 months.
You guys go for it.
We did this over
You
4
don't-
months. We
you don't-
brought you, I think, 3 or 4 presentations for this very reason. Because we're going to come to you in July and August with, here's the projects that your jurisdictions have asked us to put in the CLRP. Bear in mind what we told you over these 4 months, that we're spending a lot of money on the interstate, but the problems are mounting up on Route 3, on US 17, on Garrisonville Road, on 208. Well, those problems are mounting. And we've been spending all our money on the big interstates and Route 1, and we're not spending money on that mounting problem, which is going to get here eventually.
And oh, Chris, I'll get,
Yeah, Nick.
that major connector with high extreme congestion that, west of Tharpen, the Station Road, Robert E. Lee, like I mean, that's kind of out in the county.
Well, that's what I was looking at. If you go all the way down to local roads in 2050 at the bottom under Spotsy, Ridge Road, Daysbridge Road and Belmont.
I know,
That is.
I know, that's not even, right,
And that's gonna be a problem.
In the future,
And well, true, but
It's going to.
years is,
it's going to.
it goes by quick.
It
Right.
does.
And 25 years, you're gonna have those places all the way out there having issues.
What surprised me when we ran this model is how 208, I keep confusing those. two
joy,
names.
yeah,
What 208 looks like in 2050 in the model, that surprised me. It's gonna be bright red in
Well,
peak hour.
if I may,
Yes,
it's
sir.
already
District.
going west on 208.
Yeah.
Goes back to 3 miles from the station,
It has to,
back, it's
right.
already there.
it's not just the road.
So
And
this-
that's one of our better roads.
Well,
Do you know what I mean? Like, as far as it's wide, it's got, you know, the church. And then right there.
Yeah.
it just, so.
I have a question for Marcy or Vita in general.
Yes.
How often do you guys look at timings? Like traffic light timings or?
When they're gonna call.
No, we do corridor.
That's what
reviews. We're not gonna do 6:10 now.
We had retimed Route 3 last year. We just retimed 208. So I mean, you should see some improvements. Side streets suffer for main line, but we're trying to look at a few corridors a year throughout the district.
And how do you do that?
Oh, we have software
yeah.
that we use that it's real cute software and does nice pictures and everything, and it shows, it going up, and if you change the light, cars on it, trucks and everything, and then it shows it moving. You can change the different signal timings and it'll show you the progression
Yeah,
of the traffic.
The reason why I ask is I didn't want to be flippant. Seems like every Tuesday when we have our board meeting, I'm driving from right over here. It takes me every bit of 45 minutes to go about 15 miles.
That's because they know it's you.
On courthouse. So it's Lafayette to courthouse, and then you get
Well, this should have
across.
improved in the last month.
Well, the
So,
anomaly is the south
I
turn
noticed it.
onto Smith Station, where there's a left turn lane there, right? It's bottleneck 2 lanes. There's a lot of cars that need to go left. But they can't queue into that lane because the left turn lane isn't long enough.
Most expensive.
And so
the
that
station-
courthouse, yes, going west, Smith Station. So, I mean, I've got pictures of it where I took as far as I could see back behind to where the courthouse elementary school.
Yeah.
The cars were queued up past that.
Yeah.
All right, and I'm like, I was cussing some of
Go the back way to get
the
it.
gods of transportation. Because even when you get there now, you've got 8 seconds to make the left turn. Or whatever it is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So thinking. Trying to figure out, okay, the left turn, people are in the left turn lane, the number 1 lane. 30% of them are gonna try to go into the left turn, right? Number 1 lane. And so, well, this is a timing issue. Cars are off the road somehow quicker than the throughputs.
Yeah. I don't know that the synchronization went all the way up to the station.
Can I put in a request for that? Seriously,
I'll talk to the traffic engineer.
yeah, I know it's a troublesome intersection anyways, but. Because as soon as you get past Smith Station, it's a drag race out to.
No, they're going too fast on that.
No, I
road.
mean, it opens up. Volume
One time.
opens up, so.
Chair, just a public announcement. Stafford knows about this already, but for the rest of us, you're gonna have an example in real time of the problem occurring because to improve Courthouse Road and US 1 intersection, we have a project. And it's gonna start, is it in 2 months? I think it's gonna start. You're gonna upgrade that
The
piece
4
of
mile fork?
No, in Stafford.
Courthouse.
Oh, in Stafford.
Stafford.
Oh,
In
oh,
Stafford at the Courthouse Road and US 1 intersection, Courthouse Road is gonna be upgraded a bit and the intersection is gonna be upgraded and all that sort of jazz. But now think, what happens when we have a crash on I-95? We all go to US 1. So they've spoken to the contractor, I believe.
They're doing it right at the summer, which is the best time to do it. So we don't have any traffic.
And the contractor's been told they need to be able to vacate in 30 minutes if there's a problem. So VDOT is doing their homework to try and help us all. But I'm just saying, we're gonna have an example in real time of what's wrong with the roadway network, because when there's a crash on I-95, all of us, including me, rush over to US 1, it's gonna not look so good.
The project at Telegraph and on Route 1 at Telegraph stock has started.
There you
So
go.
those 2 different projects.
And Marcy has told me privately, and I don't think she'll mind my sharing, that they've got something like 11 years worth of upgrades on US 1 in the city of Fredericksburg about to start soon.
10, yeah.
10 years. So for 10 years, we're going to be upgrading these intersections on US 1 through the city because a lot of them are problematic and we've got projects funded. So, the transportation gods are trying, but when we start construction, then you're gonna cuss even more because it's gonna get even worse.
Flying cars by 2050.
And Carrie had something too.
Yeah. Wait, the pipeline study. We have two scale applications for levels in 208 and specific weight area and do another west.
And we're not funded.
So
No,
the transportation
So-
guys.
we remind me of that in every.
So we are trying, and we had a project in to look at the safety improvements on River Road. And they never sent us the contract to finally get it started, and now we think that the federal government's gonna cancel those projects. I don't know,
Fatality.
lots of things have been canceled. Anyway, Chair, we're not
Think we're
gonna
good?
raise this FINA again, we
All
just
right.
finally showed you.
Oh,
This
Meg,
one
do you have any questions?
You're on mute.
No, I do not. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
All right, we're going on to thank you, John. We're going on to correspondence.
This is the only thing about the river crossing that you will hear about tonight, and it's nothing you need to do about. That section there in blue is the executive summary. The long email with all of the data is the official communication that we've received from the state of Virginia's environmental review people. What's it called, DCR? Remind me.
Conservation or recreation.
There you go, Department of Conservation and Recreation. So they've had a look at our river crossing study, and they've looked at what environmental impacts they can identify, and they've sent us the list, right? So that list is what's in there. And the summary is the light blue over there, which you can read for yourself. It's in your pack. Just alerting you to it. There's nothing you need to do about it, but it does say there are some environmental concerns that we need to be aware of. And if and when the study results in a decision to move forward with building the bridge at a particular location, VDOT will take over the NEPA review process, and they will need to look at these mussels that are growing on the rocks, and they will need to look at where, the location of the proposed bridge will be. So we are taking the environmental stuff seriously for those who are concerned, and we're getting the review letters coming back, and we're sending them to the consultant, and they will be in the study report. So
Okay.
just letting you know it's there, you can read it at your leisure, and we can get the consultant to discuss it next time if you have any
Okay.
questions about it. But there are some environmental things there, but they don't, currently the consultant doesn't see it as a prohibition to us building a bridge. We're just gonna have to be sensitive about where and how we build the bridge.
Okay, and let's then go, any questions there? All good, okay, let's go on to traffic agency reports, travel demand, model congestion follow-up.
I have already done this in my slides, so you
So we're
get a
good.
free
Oh,
pass,
free
tick
pass.
it off and go home.
All right, we are at the end. Anyone have anything?
Any board,
Oh, happy
board,
St. Patrick's Day, yes.
any board or chair comment?
Today.
Oh, it's today,
Yeah,
okay.
your son.
I did.
I get to pinch you.
Oh, really? I have a question. I know, Ian, you mentioned that, the Secretary of Transportation said you have to return it in 9 days, or whatever. Said, no, we can't. What is the consequence? And send an email and,
I have already sent an email to the VDOT district, but there's no major consequence. The thing is that
I just wanna know.
they are gonna
On
present,
paper.
so the consequence is that
I don't want verbal.
they have to present to our
It's-
Commonwealth Transportation Board a draft budget. But I'm just announcing that
So you're
we're
already
gonna
sending.
get a draft budget without our allocations because we can't do it in 9 days.
So, but as long as you send
I
an email
sent
and
an
say, hey,
email.
we can, and then that they send
It-
it back.
It happens,
Let us know.
it happens every year, and every year I tell them, as soon as I can get a TAC meeting and a policy committee meeting to approve the list, I will do it and I will get you the list. In the meantime, they'll have to be happy with what we can provide, and no one can possibly do it in 9 days. It's not possible.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have to give me authority to take a crayon and just write numbers that I think are
No, the
good,
tech
right?
needs to look at that and do all that, I think.
I never do it.
Yeah,
I always
That needs
give it
to
to
be
the
done
tech.
by them. Okay, anyone else? We're all good? Motion to adjourn?
Yes, Chair, Hayes.
Yes.
Thank you. I do believe there is a CTV meeting tomorrow. Is there anything, that the CTB is voting on that pertains to, the Fredericksburg FAMPO region?
Yes, there is.
She's coming, hold on, Meg.
Anything we need to know?
Studies.
Oh,
Fredericksburg has 4 pipeline studies in the region, 5.
one in Caroline, one in King George.
There's 1 in King George, 1 in Caroline, 2 in Stafford, 1 in Spotsylvania. So, Stafford has 1 on Mine Road and 1 on Truslow Road. They're at the new schools. Spotsylvania is. Pull that one up, because I'm not as familiar with Spotsy. King George is out on 208, I believe, 218, by going out towards Delran. Caroline, I'm not familiar with.
Okay, Commissioner, Sellers, is there anything that the FAMPO board needs to be lobbying for on your behalf?
Vice versa.
See tomorrow. I mean, when we have our spring meeting, if you guys could come, and these pipeline studies are incredibly important, so make sure that folks show up or send letters and say thank you, because they are very important for future funding. This is what's gonna set you guys up for future state funding. So, you know, once these get approved and the state gets them in the system, to send your support and really let the secretary and the commissioner know they're important. That's gonna be helpful.
I agree. The one item we don't have an answer yet on is our Route 3 corridor of statewide significance. We've never got a reply. It's still up in the air. We still don't know whether they agree with us or don't agree with us or anything. It's just silence. So we would like an answer at some point to that.
Brought that up to the commissioner.
Thank you.
Yes, I brought that up with the secretary.
Thank you.
So, and tomorrow we're supposed to be getting a presentation on Patriots. That's on the agenda as well, so stay tuned. It has been in the packet as of this evening, so we'll probably get it.
And Chair, I must just thank our CTB member because she has been in attendance at most of our meetings, and that is a new thing. We have not in the past had such good attendance and input
Thank you.
from our CTB members, so I appreciate that.
So I try to just listen.
All right, so all in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Bye, Meg.
See you, man.
So one of the most interesting things